Welcome to the History Veteran UK. Does what it says on the tin. So today I'm in Dover, and if I spin you round, I'm actually on the White Cliffs just above the port of Dover. There's the Eastern Docks, the ferry terminal. And if I come round, we've got Shakespeare's Cliff in the far distance. You probably wouldn't be able to discern the break in the town there, but in the far distance is the Western Heights and Dover Castle on the Eastern Heights. You can't see it, but behind me you can just about see the mast there. That is the Coast Guard station that covers the channel. Very busy shipping area, in fact one of the busiest in the world. So the reason I'm here today isn't actually about the Port of Dover. That's Calais there in the distance. So I want to talk about Dunkirk, not about the evacuation and the salient that was formed. That's more of an analysis you'll have to find somewhere else, or of course come on one of my battlefield tours. But what I want to talk about is a resistance by British forces to stop the German army from reaching the coast, in order so that 338,000 men could escape back to England and continue the fight. Now, I'm sure most of you know that before Dunkirk was captured by the Germans and all those men that escaped, there had been fierce resistance by certain units that were pretty much left to stand to the last man and the last round. And many of these units did it. The Warwickshire Regiment, 51st Highlanders, and the Norfolks as well, at La Paradise, I think it is, and the Warwicks at Wormhout. And I'll do a little bit about those in the future. I want to talk about today is the town of Cassel. Because on the 25th of May to the 30th, the 145 Brigade, under the command of Brigadier Nigel Somerset, held Cassel for a few vital days in heavy fighting on the 27th to the 29th, although there was a brief lull on the 28th. Ensured that the men at Dunkirk had more time to get on the boats and get back across the channel. So 145 Brigade was made up of, it was a TA brigade, but it did have a regular unit attached to it, and that was the 2nd Battalion the Gloucestershire Regiment, the Gloucesters. Also there were the 4th Battalion Oxen Bucks, who were a TA battalion, along with 140 Field Regiment Artillery, 226 Field Engineers, Royal Engineers, some yeomanry, East Riding Yeomanry it was there, and also the some RAMC and signals, of course, you know, all the elements that make up a brigade. There was a battalion called the 1st Buckinghamshire Battalion, who were part of the Oxen Bucks. They were sent to defend the small town of Hazebrook, which is to the south of Cassel. So on the 25th of May, the brigade arrived in the area, having left the Scheld, the river, moved westwards and had been at Nomain the night before, which is just south of Lille, and then they moved slightly northwest to Cassel. And Cassel is it's just like a hump on the Flanders plains. There are a few bits of high ground, but Cassel pretty much dominates the area, certainly the Flanders plain. And that's why it was chosen to put up a defence to hold the Germans back. Now, as I said, this isn't necessarily an analysis of the battle. There were certain elements of this battle. For example, Lieutenant Roy Cresswell, who was awarded the MC for his action at the blockhouse La Poulec. I'm sure it's La Poulec, just about 2.5 miles north of Cassel. He was detached from, he was 8th Platoon detached from A Company to hold this blockhouse, which held the route from Cassel to Dunkirk. And they put an extremely good fight up there. If you want to look that up, there's some excellent videos about that. As you know, those that watch my videos, not many, I usually just put pictures up. My editing skills aren't quite what they should be, really. But as the channel grows, I hope that that will progress. So, I want to specifically talk about the 2nd Battalion the Gloucestershire Regiment at the town of Cassel. Now, they held the western side of the town, with 4th Battalion Ox and Bucks occupying the east side. And over, as I said, from the 25th to the 26th, they practically turned the town into a fortress in 2 days. And from some well-placed gun placements by 140 Field Regiment, artillery, Royal Artillery, and a determined defence from both the Gloucesters and the Ox and Bucks, they held the German army back pretty much until they decided just to go round it. But Cassel had such a dominating, was such a dominating feature that they would have needed to take it at some stage. In the end, I think they just decided to starve them out, or they would have done that had the things not unfolded as they had. So, as I said, there was heavy fighting on the 27th to the 29th from a determined resistance. A Company and A Company was pushed down towards the town of Zupertine, which is just to the southwest of Cassel. And there was lots of small assaults and small defence positions. But in the end, with the overpowering force of the German army, there was no air cover for the brigade in Cassel. So eventually, on the 29th, it became apparent. There was an article written by Brigadier Nigel Somerset later on, after the war in '48, saying that he felt that the brigade had been overlooked by the newspapers or the government, as I'm sure many units did. But he decided to put something in the paper and explain that on the 29th they were told to break out and head for the coast, because at that stage they'd been waiting for a fierce counterattack from the BEF, or units of the BEF. As we know, history tells us that wasn't to come, because they were evacuating. Now, in this article, Brigadier Somerset says that he was unaware of that, and there's no reason for him to be disbelieved. I'm sure that was the case. Communication probably wasn't as good as it should have been, because pretty much the BEF was in disarray. So he was ordered to make a breakout. So they held until the 29th, and on the night of the 29th and the 30th they moved out and moved northeast out of Cassel. During the battle, 5 officers and 132 men were killed and many wounded. Many of the dead are buried in the Cassel Communal Cemetery. And for those of you who go there to Cassel, you'll be surprised to know that the town is actually remembered for the Guards regiments. And my cousin's husband was an ex-guardsman. He said, oh, we was at Dunkirk, at Cassel, because I'd said about the Gloucesters. It turns out the Guards were there in 1637, so I think he's got his dates wrong, but I'll speak to him about that when I see him. So anyway, moving on. So after the breakout, it wasn't an individual breakout, the battalion went on foot northwards, destroyed most of their, or all of their artillery pieces that hadn't already been destroyed. And as I said, 5 officers and 132 men were killed. I think they covered about, I think on the map it looks about maybe 5 or 6 miles. It might have been more, it may have been less. And the information I found without obtaining the war diaries from the 2nd Battalion Gloucesters, 472 men were captured and taken prisoner. They were fortunate enough not to have been taken prisoner by the SS, who had a large presence in the area, Lebensstandarte, who were responsible for some awful actions during that time. So the battalion was taken, they were marched as well for long periods, and they were taken to a camp in Poland, a town called Lambsdorff, which is now called Lebeniczwitz. My Polish is terrible. And I'll put a picture up of the gate and the actual site of where it was. And I only found that out recently. So in 43, so they'd been there. Oh, there goes my hood. So the battalion had been there from sort of, I think they arrived in September 1940 into the camp. And in 43, they changed some of the prisoner of war camps around. And there was an agreement between the governments for repatriation of those that were now non-combatant. So wounded, oh, my head's up, it's annoying. So the wounded and the very sick. And that was carried out in October of 1943. Many of the wounded and the serious sick were repatriated home. And I believe the Gloucesters came up through Sweden because they were moved across the channel on a Swedish ferry, but it could have been coming out of northern Germany. And they arrived back home and then went back to their families, or those that were very sick went into hospitals. The remainder of the battalion stayed in captivity. They had changed the camps around a bit, so they moved certain prisoners into different areas. Camp Stalag 8B, or V111B, was the camp in Poland at Lambsdorff, now Lebeniczwitz, whatever, I'll put the name up. Became Camp 344, so I'm guessing that they renumbered them because they probably had many prisoners, and it was easier just to number them. I don't know. And in 1945, the battalion was returned home after peace. Now, the reason I bring you this story is one of those soldiers that was repatriated in 1943 was a Private Fred Bond. He'd been wounded twice, once in the shoulder and once in the arm, and the wound never healed. And it's likely that that wound and his time in captivity soon turned into tuberculosis, TB. And back in the 40s and 50s, TB was pretty much a death sentence for some. Now, he was in the Gloucester Battalion. He lived in Charlton Kings, near Cheltenham, just outside Cheltenham. But he was moved to Margate, to the Sea Bathing Hospital. His wife, Rhoda Bond, moved with him. And in 1945, they had a daughter who was 12 in 1957 when, sadly, Private Fred Bond, 2nd Battalion the Gloucesters, passed away from TB. His story is one of many. I could have chosen many of the individuals. There's not much detail about his life because sadly I never met him, because that man was my grandfather. But I just thought I wanted to share that story. Like I say, I never got to meet either of my grandparents. Grandfathers, sorry. One died in '62, my paternal, and my maternal grandfather, Fred Bond, died in 1957. And I'll stick a picture up of him. But he was a regular soldier. In fact, when he was repatriated, the first thing he did was went and joined the TA and served with the TA battalion after that. They wouldn't have deployed him, of course, but it just showed the character of the man. So anyway, that's I suppose that gives you a little bit of my own history, and hopefully remembers the men of the 2nd Battalion, the Gloucester Regiment, the Gloucesters, glorious Gloucesters, and my granddad, Private Fred Bond. I might be doing a disservice because I think he might have been a Lance Corporal. But if you like my videos, please like and subscribe if you wish. And I hope you've enjoyed this coming from Dover. It's a bit blowy, but it's a lovely day up here. Until the next time, thanks.